Welcome back, everyone. Today we are taking a deep dive into something pretty fascinating, a real estate boom, but with a twist. And to help me unpack all this, I've got an expert in global real estate trends here with me today.
Hey, glad to be here.
Now, everyone's heard about, the Chinese investors kind of dominating the global real estate market for the last decade or so, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But today's deep dive, we are looking at a really interesting case study coming out of Phuket, Thailand, where things have taken a very interesting turn.
For sure.
We're looking at some excerpts from an article that we're just calling pasted text for now. And
Yeah.
the big takeaway here, the thing that really piqued my interest was that we're not talking about Chinese investors anymore. We're talking about Russians.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a huge shift. We're talking 40 to 60% of the market share in Phuket now owned by Russian buyers.
Wow. 40 to 60%. That is a massive chunk. I mean, a couple of years ago, practically non-existent, right?
Yeah, tiny, tiny presence, basically negligible, and now they're the dominant force.
That is wild. So what is going on over there? What's driving this huge surge in Russian investment in Phuket?
Well, it's a couple of things, really. Obviously, the geopolitical situation with the conflict in Ukraine has been a big factor. A lot of wealthy Russians looking for safe havens for their assets.
Right. Makes sense.
And Thailand has, a pretty stable economy, welcoming environment, politically neutral. So it's an attractive option.
Sure. I mean, there's other stable countries out there, though, right? Why Phuket specifically?
Well, that's where the local trends come in. Thailand's tourism industry has really bounced back strong after the pandemic, particularly in Phuket.
I mean, I can see why beautiful beaches, right?
Exactly. It's a paradise. And guess who's leading the charge of tourists returning to those beaches?
I have a feeling I know the answer to this.
Russians, they're flocking back to Phuket, and that renewed interest in vacationing there has naturally kind of spilled over into the real estate market.
It's like, hey, we love it here.
Yeah.
Why not just buy a place?
Exactly. It's the I love it here factor driving a lot of these purchases.
Makes total sense. Now, the source material we're looking at, it mentions this huge boom in luxury villas in Phuket. Is that tied to this influx of Russian buyers?
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely the target demographic for these developers. I mean, the numbers are pretty astounding. In the first half of 2023 alone, there were 541 new luxury villas launched.
Wow.
In Phuket, compared to just 45 in the same period last year. I mean, that is an insane increase.
More than 10 times, right?
Way more. It's just exploded.
Okay, so that leads to another question. Is there a concern that there's going to be this oversaturation of luxury villas? I mean,
Yeah.
even with this huge influx of Russian buyers, are there enough people to buy all these properties?
Yeah, it's a valid concern for sure. And it is something that is highlighted in the article. Developers are definitely walking a tightrope here. There's this huge opportunity, but they don't want to tip the scales and end up with a bunch of empty villas and a price crash.
Right, that wouldn't be good for anybody.
No, not at all. So the smart developers, they're doing their homework. They're doing really in-depth market research to figure out exactly what these Russian buyers are looking for. It's not just about building a fancy villa. It's about understanding their specific needs and desires.
So, like, what kind of stuff are they looking for?
Well, for example, a lot of them are interested in properties that can generate rental income. So they're looking for features that appeal to, tourists, short-term renters, things like that.
So they're thinking about the investment side of things.
Oh, absolutely. They're savvy investors. They want to make sure their money is working for them.
The whole strategy.
It is, yeah. It's not just build it and they will come anymore. It's much more nuanced than that.
Now, this brings up another interesting point. So many of these buyers are coming from overseas. Does that create any unique challenges or opportunities for Phuket?
Oh, for sure. Managing properties for absentee owners, especially when they're coming from a completely different culture and speak a different language, it requires a very specific skill set.
Right. I could see how that could be tricky.
It is, and the demand for top-notch property management services has gone way up in Phuket. These investors need someone on the ground who they can trust to handle everything, maintenance repairs, dealing with tenants, paying local taxes, you name it.
So it's a whole industry that's sprung up around this.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole ecosystem. It's not just real estate. It's a whole support system that's grown up around it.
That's fascinating. Now, it's not just villas, though, right? The article also mentioned a resurgence in the condo market. What's going on there?
That's right. Condos are making a comeback, and once again, Russians are leading the charge.
No way, really?
Yeah, they're buying up condos like crazy. In fact, in the first quarter of 2022, Russian buyers actually overtook the Chinese, who had previously dominated that segment of the market.
Oh, wow. So they're not just going for the high-end stuff. They're looking at condos, too.
Exactly. They're diversifying their investments. They're seeing opportunities across the board. I mean, we're talking 74 condo units worth $245 million baht.
That's the Thai currency, right?
That's right, 245 million baht in just 3 months. That's a significant chunk of change.
So does this mean the condo market in Phuket is fully recovered? Is it back to pre-pandemic levels?
Well, it's a very encouraging sign for sure, having both Russian and Chinese buyers back in the game. It really boosts developer confidence, and that attracts even more investors. It creates this positive feedback loop.
So it sounds like things are really looking up for Phuket's real estate market.
Yeah, overall, it's a very exciting time to be watching this market. It's dynamic, it's evolving, and it's full of opportunities.
So to recap, it sounds like Phuket's real estate market is undergoing a complete transformation driven by this huge wave of Russian investment fueled by global events and, of course, that booming tourism industry. But this brings us to the million-dollar question. How sustainable is this trend in the long term?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, relying so heavily on one nationality for investment always carries a certain amount of risk.
Right.
I mean, what happens if the political or economic situation in Russia shifts? Will that have a ripple effect on the Phuket market? And then there's the potential for oversaturation that we talked about earlier. So there are definitely some factors to keep an eye on.
It's a fascinating case study for sure, and it leaves us with a lot to think about.
Definitely.
So for all of you listening out there, here's something to ponder. Given all of these geopolitical and economic factors swirling around,
Yeah.
do you think this Russian dominance in Phuket will continue? Or could we see another shift on the horizon? Maybe a new player will emerge, or perhaps things will swing back in favor of Chinese investors. Only time will tell. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the ever-changing world of Phuket real estate.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you all next time for another deep dive.